You gonna ask me another question that's gonna go in the intro? No questions? What's that look on your face for? They do know you're here because I tell everybody you're behind the camera all the time. I'm not talking to myself. Hey BookTube, it's Kim at Middle of the Bookmarch, and here it is, the video you've all been waiting for, my best of the best for 2024. And I know not all of you have been waiting for this, but hey, let me think that. Let me just go on thinking that. I have 10 books for you that were my favorites of 2024. And it's weird, but I think they're exactly divided between nonfiction and fiction. 5 nonfiction, 5 fiction. I have them all rated 10-1. And not because they're not good books, but the bottom 5 are all the nonfiction and the top 5 are all the fiction. I've said this before, my primary reading is in fiction, which is my first love. So this is not really a surprise, but there are definitely nonfiction books out there in the world that are spectacular and I have loved and given wholehearted 5 stars to. So let me show you the best books that I read, the best reading experiences that I had last year. Number 10, I'm going to try to get her name right. This is World of Wonders by Amy Nezhukumatatle. I think I got that right. This is in praise of fireflies, whale sharks, and other astonishments. This was a complete surprise for me. I think I found it at a library sale or a thrift store, and I thought, oh, that's been all over BookTube. I'm just going to try that. It was wonderful. It is so pretty. The cover is so pretty. But this is nature writing, and there's all kinds of weird little animals in here. And pictures. There are pictures everywhere. There's the narwhal. And it's like there's little tiny sections and little chapters with each of the animals that she is discussing. And it's just phenomenal. I absolutely loved it. And in between the discussion about animals, she talks about her own stories. It's kind of a mixture between nature writing and a memoir. And I loved it. I loved how she wrote it. I loved hearing and reading more about her background and her life, along with how and why she loves these animals. It was just a surprise to me that I enjoyed it as much as I did. And it's a great book to recommend to anybody who kind of would like the mixture of memoir and nature writing. She's a poet, and that came through in her writing. It's beautifully done. And I loved this reading experience. It didn't take very long at all either, and it was just so wonderful. The next one, number 9, is The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore. This is the shocking story of a woman who dared to fight back. This book is phenomenal. I actually listened to this one, and the narration and the audiobook was awesome. I highly recommend it. This is set in 1860. And Kate Moore also wrote Radium Girls. If you've read that one, I highly recommend picking this one up. Now, this is Elizabeth Packard. This is Elizabeth Packard's true story. She is locked up into an asylum by her husband, Theophilus. He's putting her in her place, basically. So he sends her to the Illinois State Hospital in Jacksonville, Illinois. I don't remember how long she ended up there. It's a long time. She was there for years. She was in asylums for years. He basically had her kidnapped and brought to insane asylums because he quite literally wanted to put her in her place. She was too smart. She was too assertive. She was too good of a person. She was too attached to her children. And he was a cold, bitter theologian and minister, extremely self-righteous and egotistical, narcissistic, and insecure. And he had her locked away. But what she did to survive and what she did to not be silenced, how she got her voice out there, her message, how she finally made people realize what he did to her and what type of a person he was. It's just a phenomenal book. So illuminating, really interesting, so easy to read, and just an excellent piece of history, and it's all true. The maddening part is this happened to so many women, and not even just describing it as gaslighting, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. What Elizabeth did to help other women, even while she was in the midst of this horror, is absolutely startling, what she accomplished. So excellent piece of history. This next one is a book that I fairly recently read and listened to, which was great. This is Rethinking Diabetes, What Science Reveals About Diet, Insulin, and Successful Treatment by Gary Taubes. I think I had a whole video on just the diabetic booktuber. So if I remember, I'll put the link to that video below, but take a look at that video as well. I loved this book, and I was diagnosed with diabetes like 30 years ago. So I've lived with it for a really long time, but I learned stuff from this book. And when I want to learn about something, I read. I look it up online, I find books, I find articles, I read up on things. When I am shocked by something or upset by something, I'll research it and find books. And that's what I've done, for years. But this one was just spectacular. I learned so much. This was published last year, so it's brand new. And I think that's why I learned a lot from it. The history of insulin, the diabetic cures that they used to prescribe to patients, the all butter diet, all butter, that's all you ate was butter. The all sugar diet, they thought that if you ate sugar, your body would almost become immune to it and it would reverse diabetes. What they did to diagnose diabetics, and all of the most recent diets and ways to manage the condition, the Atkins diet, high protein diets, keto, he talks about all of that, and it's so fascinating. If you have diabetes, you know somebody who does, you're on the cliff of possibly being diagnosed, this is a great book. And it's very easy to follow, very easy to understand. There's obviously some medical portions that are like, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm going to blow through those. But this was an excellent book to read, and I'm very glad I spent time with that one. Let's see. I am on number 7. That was number 8. This is number 7. Broke in America by Joanne Samuel Goldblum and Colleen Shaddix. Seeing, Understanding, and Ending U.S. Poverty. When I look at books like this about any type of American social or political status of the country, or social aspects or activism, anything like that, what I think I'm going to get when I read a book is kind of a commentary, an analysis. And it's like, okay, then what? This book actually has solutions. This book did an analysis of what causes poverty in America, understanding it, how do we end it, and exactly what the subtitle says: Seeing, Understanding, and Ending U.S. Poverty. The first part of the book talks about where we see poverty and what are the instances of it, how we see it around the country. The second is understanding it. What caused people to live in poverty? How do you go from living a normal sort of middle class life and then ending up poor or homeless? And then ending U.S. poverty. What can we do politically, socially, on a daily basis, on an individual basis to end U.S. poverty? This is an exceptional book. And just the solutions that these authors have, the research, the statistics, just go and buy this. I listened to it and have the physical copy. I read a little bit. It's an excellent book. Plenty of notes, plenty of things to look further into. And I love a book like this that actually offers solutions. Number 6. This is my most recent nonfiction, I think. I have the physical copy because I cannot help myself. I listened to this on audio. I would recommend listening to the audio. And if you feel like it, go out and buy the physical book, which I did. This is the sequel to Taste. This is Stanley Tucci, What I Ate in 1 Year. I love this guy. I love this guy as an actor. I love him as a foodie, as a food connoisseur, all of it. And his first memoir, Taste, I think this was just a continuation of how much I loved Taste. Taste has so many things in there that are just uplifting, heartwarming, drool-inducing with all of the Italian foods. This is basically a diary of what he ate in 1 year, what his life was like in 1 year, what his family life was like, what he thought, the jobs that he did, where he traveled, the food and the food that he ate. It's set up exactly like a diary. So each section, each chapter is June 22nd, June 23rd, June 24th, so on and so on. Yes, it does include recipes. So go ahead and buy this book just to see the recipes, but listen to him on audio narrate his second memoir about food. Just awesome. Loved it. Okay, here are the top 5 books, and these are all the fiction, the novels. And I honestly did not mean to do it that way. That's just how my reading experiences went last year. This number 5 is The Queen of Dirt Island by Donal Ryan. Donal Ryan is an Irish author. Absolutely just so got into this book. This is the story of the Aylward women of Nana Tipperary. I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly. They are mad about each other, but you wouldn't always think it. This is the story of just a raucous Irish family. And what is Dirt Island, and why is there a queen of Dirt Island? It's all explained in this novel. It's a good short one. The story begins at the end and ends at the beginning. It is children, and it is the grandparents and parents and children and grandchildren, all the generations in this sweet short book. And how do these kids grow up? What is the family like? What are the extended family members? What is Dirt Island? Who is the queen and why? And I loved it. Donal Ryan's writing is exceptional. And I love Irish novels. I love reading stories of Irish families. And this is a great one. Maggie O'Farrell wrote a blurb on the back, and she wrote, "This book exerts a quiet, propulsive hold over its reader. The 3 generations of Aylward women will break your heart and then put it back together again." I could not agree more with that blurb. The Queen of Dirt Island. Please read that. I don't think you'll be sorry. Now, this book has ended up as the top book of so many booktubers years last year. For me, it was number 4. It's still a 5-star book. But whenever I think about the best books of my year, I think about my reading experience as well as the book, the writing, the plot, the characters. But this is a 5-star book for me in the top 5 of my year last year. This is James by Percival Everett. I read this with Erin from Erin Go Live and just had the best conversation with her about this book. It's exceptional. This is a reimagining of Jim's story, The Enslaved Man from Huckleberry Finn. You do not have to read Huckleberry Finn first. This book very easily stands all on its own. And James refers to the way that Jim refers to himself. He does not look at himself as Jim, the enslaved man. He looks at himself as James, an educator of children and a keeper of history. This is such a beautifully written commentary, wonderfully paced novel, incredible characters. It's Percival Everett. He is a master. I am so happy that this is an award-winning book, National Book Award, I believe. And I just don't know I don't know anybody who hasn't read it on BookTube. I don't know. If you haven't, I would love for you to read it. So many booktubers have just praised this as their number 1 book of the year. It's just phenomenal. So as I said, you don't have to read Huckleberry Finn first. This is not a slow read, but it's such beautiful writing. And sometimes for me, when I read a book that is so gorgeous, I slow myself down. I slow my roll because I don't want to miss anything. But this is all of it. This is a great story and beautifully written. Number three. One of my favorite authors, Mr. Flood's Last Resort by Jess Kid. Jess Kid is an Irish author, one of the funniest authors of domestic stories and weird, mysterious things happening. Absolutely love her writing, and this is no exception. Mr. Flood's Last Resort is renamed The Hoarder in the UK or in Europe, but Mr. Flood is our central character. even though he's not the one that is guilty of the action, this is Maud Drennan, who's kind of employed as his caretaker. He is an elderly man, not really taking care of himself, even if he is capable of it. What's going on in Mr. Flood's house? Why is he a hoarder? What's the family background? What's the family story? What happened to Mr. Flood's wife? Did he have a part in that? There's a mystery. There are ghosts. There is weird stuff that happens. There is domestic tension. It is awesome. I loved it. There's a bunch of cats. It is super funny. Maud is a wonderfully quirky, interesting character, and Mr. Flood basically will knock your socks off. I loved this book, and I love Jess Kid. This is a book I can recommend to everybody and anybody. I absolutely just loved my reading experience with this one. And you've probably heard me gush, but the only Jess Kid book I have left is The Night Ship, which I'll be reading with Britta and Doris this month. Number 2. This one almost became number 1, but I could not deny number 1's pull for my heartstrings. This is The Wall by Marlon Hofhauser, Haushofer, translated by Sean Whiteside from the German. That cow is super important to this story. The Wall is just a spectacular piece of translated fiction. I was blown away by this. And the weird thing is, as I was reading the book, there's a middle part that was, at the time I thought, this is so slow, it's repetitive, it's the same thing over and over and over again. And then I stopped myself and I realized there's a reason for that. There's a reason she wrote it that way. And once I caught on to the genius of this author, it was just go, keep reading. And even during those slow parts, there were passages that were simply brilliant, genius. This is the story of a woman who is the parent of 2 grown daughters and a widow, a middle-aged woman. I believe she's a widow. She is vacationing in a hunting lodge with a couple friends of hers who are a couple, and she wakes up one morning to find herself separated by the rest of the world by an invisible wall. Her friends go into town, they never come back. So she wakes up the next morning and she's like, where are they? I don't know, where'd they go? She starts to set out towards the direction of town and literally walks into an invisible wall. Just for the life of her, can't figure out what's happening. What is this thing? She is left with a dog, a stray cat, and a cow. What's her life going to be like? How is she going to survive this? What happens? How does she stay in the middle of the Austrian wilderness? And what is the resolution of this book? It says so much about isolation, motherhood, marriage, independence, identity, a woman's place in the world. And how would we survive in a situation like this, in pure isolation with nothing but animals for companionship? Just a spectacular book. And here's all my dog ears. This is a keeper. That's a keeper. So, The Wall by Marlon Haushofer, translated from the German by Sean Whiteside. Excellent book. Number 1. This came as a total shock to me, too. This will shock you, probably, unless you heard me talk about this book in one of my wrap-ups. This is a book that's been around forever. It was published in, let's see, not forever. It was published in 1986, I think. I'm looking here. Yeah, I think it's 1986. This was not published as an adult novel. This is published as a children's middle grade, not even young adult, but probably a middle grade novel. I was surprised at its complexity and ease of writing, if that makes any sense. But this is Redwall by Brian Jakes. Yes, this is my number 1 book of last year. Why is it my number 1 book of last year? I cried. I loved this book. I loved the story. There's violence and warfare and bloodshed and fantasy and bravery and terror and a mouse warrior named Matthias. My favorite character is Constance the Badger. If I ever come back to this earth as an animal, I want to be a badger, and I'd want to be like Constance. They are fighting a rat army, and it's just such a fantastic fantasy story. I listened to it on audio, and it was absolutely brilliant. The minute I finished it, after I got done crying, I bought my physical copy. It is the very beginning in a very long series that I can't wait to get to, and I am not a series reader, but this one I hope I will stick with. The second book is Mossflower, which is in the other room. I already have it. So, I don't know if that surprises you or not. If you are familiar with my reading, you know I love fantasy. I don't read it too often, but when I do, I love it. I don't remember the last time I read a fantasy novel that I didn't like, but Redwall is just superior for me, and I absolutely loved my experience with this last year. That was number 1. What I do want to let you know is I had so many rereads last year, and they were all phenomenal. I left them out of this video because it's just not fair to all the other books. All the other books would have been sad. But I reread East of Eden by John Steinbeck. Another one that is just, I don't have words. These honorable mentions, the rereads, I don't have words to describe. I read Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather. Again, another phenomenal book. I read the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy after reading The Hobbit the year prior, and listened to the Lord of the Rings trilogy narrated by Andy Serkis. Again, can't gush enough. I read Milkman by Anna Burns. Listened to it on audio. It is fantastic on audio. Absolutely loved it. And I also read The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I read both East of Eden and Grapes of Wrath last year. I do believe that Grapes of Wrath is my favorite Steinbeck, and then East of Eden is a very close second. And I also read Middlemarch last year. I reread Middlemarch, listened to much of it on audio by Juliet Stevenson, and just, I adore it. I will probably reread it again this year. So you can understand why I had to keep all of the rereads out of this best of for 2024. None of the other books would have had a chance. So, pick up Redwall if you're so moved. If your kids have read it, if you've never read it, if you love fantasy, tell me what you think about Redwall. I would love to see more readers show their reviews on BookTube. That is it for me. That's it for my 2024 videos, the worst of, the best of, and everything in between. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, everybody.